let's just, yep. And we're on the air, with Captain Sean David Morton, keeping it strange from the inside. How's things going?
Going well. Sorry I have to talk faster, but it's, we've only got a limited amount of time. I sent a big blog post out today that has a lot to do with the Dulce Mesa. I noticed that that's starting to come up in the Sorcia Fall reports and the Ben Fulford reports, and basically seeping out of the alt media into the mainstream media. And there's nobody alive on the planet right now that knows more about the Dulce Mesa than I do. And so everybody needs to look for the blog post, look for alternative reality disorder. On the blog post about that, I did a whole big thing about Dulce. My prediction for the Supreme Court had also been that, win, lose, or draw. My idea was my front runner was always Kavanaugh. Kind of an interesting thing, too, because I told people here that, I don't know if this is complete non sequitur, but that LeBron James was going to move to Los Angeles. And everybody's like, no way, he's not going to move to L.A., and now he's moving to Los Angeles, which, was kind of a lame prediction because he already owned 2 houses there, and he's got an office at Paramount Studios because he wants to get into movies and television and all that. But let's talk about, anything that you particularly want to talk about, any subject you want to cover in the 15 minutes that we have?
Well, God, blimey. Look, you've been sitting there thinking, lots. What's been going through your brain?
Okay. The biggest thing for me that I've been talking about for a while, and this was what I made my real claim to fame to, was earth changes and earthquake predictions, going all the way back through the 1980s, 90s, the double O's, the teens. And to refresh people's memory, I predicted the San Francisco earthquake in '89. On October 1st, 17 days before the quake, I took a group up to Mount Shasta to see if we could work the vortex to try to stop or lessen or at least push the quake away from San Francisco. It happened exactly as I predicted. My prediction was that the quake was going to happen between October 15th and Halloween of that year of '89. And, of course, it happened October 17th. It was called the World Series earthquake. It was actually when the Giants, I think, were playing the A's, I think. But and then, of course, the Northridge quake, and I made the national news in Japan by predicting the Kobe quake, on and on and on it goes. So this is the danger. When all this stuff started happening, I started telling people that California was going back into a state of instability, that it literally felt like the platelet itself was beginning to roll.
This call is from a federal prison.
Very bad things were happening. So then we had the eruption of Kilauea, which is sort of at the middle of the Ring of Fire. Then we have the eruption of the volcano in Guatemala. Both volcanoes I've been to. I actually flew over Kilauea or near Kilauea, actually the lava flow from Kilauea in a helicopter, and visited Guatemala, where we had a ceremony with a jaguar priestess lady, where a jaguar actually appeared in one of the pictures. Now, here's the interesting thing that's happening: is that the lava from Kilauea is actually coming down, and it's actually seeping into about 1,000-foot crevice on the other side. And if this area actually collapses, then you're talking about a 100-foot or larger tidal wave that could then take out sections of the West Coast, possibly mostly Baja, lower parts of Mexico, and San Diego, because the waterline shoals actually to San Diego, whereas right off Los Angeles, the water's, well, it's not that deep, but it's at least about 250, 300 feet or so. Now, this goes along the same lines of another huge, potentially murderous volcano. Just to tell you how the military deals with this stuff, there's a volcano in the Canary Islands, which is called Las Palmas. And Las Palmas, if Las Palmas was to blow and rupture that volcano, half that island would actually split in half and go into the ocean and cause 1,000-foot tidal wave that would actually wipe out the East Coast within about, depending on how long it would travel, I would say within about a day or so. It would take that long for the tidal wave to make it. Now, 10 years ago, the military was saying, look, we got to do something about this, and everybody just ignored them. So then I told people that the secret military, or whatever you want to call it, was actually working underground and drilling on the leeward side of that volcano. And, of course, then all these microquakes started coming up. So what the military actually did over the course of the last 10 years was actually drill on the other side of the Las Palmas volcano so that if there was a rupture, it would actually collapse inward towards the African coast. and not send this big, mega tidal wave towards the East Coast. So that's the first thing that I'm disconcerted about. Now you can still get my books at strangeuniverseradio.com. You get the books, you get the audio. Thank you for still playing the audio, by the way. In the third book, which is the Isomer Protocol, I talk a lot about the development of the technology and how we have the space fleet in its early stages, the USS Grissom, the Shepherd, the USS John Glenn, and I talk about a confrontation that we had with the Altarians over some stuff that was going on Mars. Now, it's fascinating to me because now Donald Trump has decided that he's going to create a fifth arm of the military. Now, it used to just be the Army, and then the Army split up into the Army and the Air Force. You had the Navy, and of course the Marines have existed since 1775. But now Trump has declared that he's now doing the United States Space Force and the United States Space Command. And for years, all the stuff that's off planet, the Starfleet, for lack of a better term, was all based out of Strategic Air Command, or SAC, in Nebraska. And they called it the Nebraska Navy because it was all based out of Nebraska for whatever reason. And I don't know if they've moved it all yet. They've moved almost everything to Utah, into an underground base. Anybody listening in Salt Lake City, because Salt Lake City is like on fire right now with the Ridgeway fire there. But they've hollowed out the underground of Kings Peak in the Uinta National Forest, and that's where the big giant underground facility is. Basically, they've moved everything there. They've moved NORAD, they've moved Strategic Air Command, all underneath Kings Peak. So the fact that Trump is now talking about this Space Force, and they're actually actively talking about facing invaders that are on their way here in the mainstream media and the alt media as well, all the releases that you've got out of the Pentagon, and to have then Ben Fulford mention it, and that Trump now has a truck in his motorcade that now talks to deep space satellites via NASA, that they're talking about how now he has the ability to talk to Mars. I don't know if that's a joke or not, but it's an actual, watch his motorcade now. You'll actually see the very last truck is a big black GMC truck that has a big bubble on the top of it with deep space capabilities. So everything that I talked about in Sands of Time is coming true.
This call is from a federal prison.
The problem is that Book 4, Time Runner, which is, was sitting in my computer before the feds decided to throw me in jail for writing those books and everything else. I mean, he gave me the whole layout back in 2009, 2010, talked about Trump becoming president, talked about the Space Force, talked about revealing the technology, talked about what was going to go on with North and South Korea, which is really kind of a shame because, I'm obviously going to be publishing the book after the fact. But, so there we go. Now let's talk about, I also want to thank everybody out there. I mean, from the absolute bottom of my heart. I feel like Sally Fields, where I'm like, wow, you like me, you really like me. Everybody that contributed to Life is Darn Good, Yes, at yahoo.com. Life is Darn Good, Yes, at yahoo.com. Now, that doesn't go to me. It goes to the people that are doing my law research. And because of that, that has freed these folks up and freed me up to be able to put all this together and have them help me do all the things because, it's almost impossible to do anything from in here. But it's actually going to allow me to put in my appeal early to basically slam dunk this thing. I mean, I believe that the appeal is 99.9%. The worst that could happen is everything is going to be dismissed, and they might be able to come back for a new trial, which I will win hands down, maybe on one, possibly two counts, but none of this stuff where they threw so much crap at the jury and so much fecal matter up against the wall, and they just hoped that it would stick, that the jury really had no choice but to just, the complete muddle. So I can't thank everybody enough for all the contributions. We're just about hitting our goal. Life is Darn Good, Yes, at yahoo.com. So that's allowed me to actually put in the appeal like this week and move the entire schedule up. So, my hope is that the appeal and their response and then my response to that will all be done, and I should be out of here by my birthday on October 1st. All right, Dulce. Let's talk about Dulce, because Fulford talked about how, once again, that Trump, in his Fulford report, that Trump was going to go after something that's going on at Dulce. Now, in 1989, I don't know how I can say this quickly enough. In 1989, I was part of an investigative research crew, not only a film crew, but also a scientific crew, that consisted of Dr. Fred Bell, Dr. Jim Delatoso, myself, Joe Randazzo, Paul Shepard, and this whole thing was about actually proving that there was an underground base in Dulce. This guy named Bill Moore threw it out there and said, oh, Dulce's fake, and I made the whole thing up, and I just wanted to show how stupid UFO investigators could be. So we started this whole, as part of our documentary, UFO contactees, which later became UFO Library Magazine and all the stuff that was going on. And with the help of the late Colonel Wendell Stevens, we interviewed 2 engineers that were responsible for hollowing out the Dulce Mesa in 1955. Now, the mesa was supposed to be used for atomic waste, and the governor said no. But what they found in the mesa is they actually found cave paintings of Apaches fighting serpent men. And graves or skeletons of these Apache Indians actually in the death throes of them in combat with the skeletons of these, of these standing reptile men. So what I believe is that underground, so then it goes on, and then they used it for genetic research facility and all that stuff, and what we proved with our sounding is that we blasted the base with the tone of a Pleiadian beam ship, figuring that whatever was down there, we were going to give them a hell of a headache, and all kinds of crazy stuff happened. But what happened was we ran it through 75 hours of crazy supercomputer time, and we proved absolutely that there's an atomic pile at the center of the base itself, that there were jet tubes that were actually running trains going back and forth. I still remember to this day, we're actually filming Jim Delatoso, and when he turned on the sounding equipment, he got this shocked look on his face and said, either all my equipment needs to be recalibrated or we're standing on top of New York City. There was that much activity underneath us at Dulce. And after we sounded the base, 2 giant green fireballs were actually seen coming out of the facility. One was like January 9th, and the other one was January 19th of 1990. And I spoke to my contact at Dulce, this guy named Fred Electric Warrior, his actual name, who said that the base at that time had been evacuated. Now, these giant fireballs were seen all across the western and eastern United States. But what I think is that, and it's detailed in Sands of Time, but it's kind of subtle. Phil Schneider was one of the guys, was one of the mole men that was actually working on completing the jet tube, and they were using Dulce as they were coming from one way from the west, and Schneider was coming from the east, so they were going to kind of drive like the golden spike of the 2 railways coming together. And Schneider was the one that then found this gigantic abattoir of stuff. You're going to have to read Sands of Time to figure out what's going on, but that's kind of what started things happening. But when we went into Dulce with our strike force, what we found was that the Alpha Draconians, that you could call, I guess, I found there's 2 factions. There's what's called the New Republic, and the Dominion is what the reptilians call themselves. And, these factions go back trillions of years. But I firmly believe that what happened was, about 65 million years ago, is that the reptiles went underground, into underground caverns, or maybe even hollow earth, and their evolution has been assisted by the Alpha Draconians, or the great red dragon that's talked about in the Bible, whereas the mammals have been assisted on the surface in our evolution, quite possibly by the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, or some of the more friendly races. But these serpent men, the Nepalese and the Tibetans called them the Nagasarachi, which is the royal serpent men. And I had some direct experience with these beings when I was living in Nepal, and we did a 4-day trek underground, and we did this big meditation in front of a big door. And then it took us like 3 days to get down, and then 4 days to come up, so the whole thing lasted about a week. But, nobody wanted to be the last in line, because everybody knew that there were these, reptile men who, once again, have evolved into humanoid, kind of bipedal, look a lot like, the lizard Spider-Man. So I think they keep coming up with the bottom, because the Indians seem to believe that Dulce sits on a hive of these serpent men, or reptile men, or whatever. You have a question?
No, I think that's some strange. That's the theme tune coming in. I don't know how many minutes you've got left. Very exciting news. So it's all good. How's your eye?
I'm still blind in my right eye. They blinded me. I can't get the operation to fix it, so it still looks like I'm looking out for a fishbowl. So just everybody watch California. Watch the fires in Northern California. Of course, the fires here. Watch what's going on with Dulce. Watch what's going on with Trump with big announcements of technology. Watch for Kavanaugh to actually be the Supreme Court nominee, and that's going to trigger a big fight. And I love you, bless you, keep you. And I got a bunch of blogs. Please post them to me, because we're almost out of time.
Every Wednesday.
Thank you very much, Sean. Everybody sends love. I've tried to contact these people.